I'm here with Daniel Rothschild, and we're going to continue with our discussion on anarchism. I wanted to ask him a couple of questions. One is, under anarchism, would there be a lot of security agencies or DROs, however you want to call it?
Yeah. I think that depends on the. I think that depends on the type of societies. I mean, I think you have, first of all, you have anarchy, not in an ideal state, but in certain pockets of the world. Uh, I think when people talk about,
You mean Somalia?
yeah, which is not great, but if you compare it when they had a state, they're actually better off. So you have to compare apples to apples. So yes, I would say United States with government is better than Somalia without. But I would say if you compare the same region, Somalia without government is better than Somalia with. You have places in Africa, millions of people without a state, Zomia without a state. So I don't know exactly what the future is going to look like. I don't make predictions about the future, but I would assume that there may very well be a demand and a supply for defense agencies. I mean, currently you have private security guards
Well,
now.
wait a second. Are you saying there are going to be many, or not? I'm saying would there probably be many security agencies? That was the question.
Likely, yes.
Very likely.
Very
Like,
likely.
is it probable that there are going to be many different shoe companies?
Yes, I would say there would be many defense agencies and many shoe companies.
Right. With these many agencies, people would gravitate to the ones that offered the contracts that they agreed with, the prices they agreed with, the values that they agreed with. So there would be differences in these agencies' laws and regulations regarding criminal law, civil law, inheritance law, tort law, civil procedure, criminal procedure, corporate law, etc. Right? And there would be some that would cater to people that believed in Sharia law, Muslims that believe in Sharia law, Mormons that believe in Mormon law, environmentalists that think that the environment is the biggest thing, and so everything has to be centered around the environment. There would be, every divide that you can think of. People that like the agency because they believe that abortion is murder. People that believe just the opposite, and they would gravitate towards abortion is a right you have because it's your own body, right? So you have all these differences, right?
Yeah.
That's not so hard to predict.
Right.
It's almost like a sure thing, like there are going to be different shoe companies with different shoe sizes and different prices.
Right. I agree.
Anybody who understands the market, that's the whole point of having a market, that you have a whole
There'd be a
selection of possible services. Okay. Cheap ones that don't offer too much protection. We don't even have a police force or any, we just try to do alliances, arbitration. Others that say, no, we're going to be there for you, right or wrong.
Right.
There would be some that even criminal gangs, people that believe in predation. So what we have today as criminals,
Right.
you would have security agencies or organizations of a similar nature
Right.
that whose objective was to predate on other people or that were weaker than themselves, as predators generally do. So you have all of these different agencies, and you have conflicts between the laws and the values that they are putting forth, right? So, with
There's a table for radio.
of opinion on all of these subjects, and some of these are going to be heartfelt beliefs, which don't lend themselves to arbitration, like is it murder or it's not murder? It's hard to say it was half murder. And so, would some of these agencies decide to enforce their view? In other words, use their force. We think this is a crime, so we are going to enforce it.
Most likely. I think it also depends on the popularity of the view. If they have a view that's fringe, they might find great resistance. So I think it often depends on the view itself and how widespread and popular it is.
Yeah, well, but some of them, like the one we mentioned, abortion and non-abortion, is like split down the middle, or
Yeah, they might very well.
60-40. But anyway, the
Okay.
point is that there will be some agencies that would not want to go to arbitration or would not agree to the arbitration award, which they would decide to enforce
Right.
their view. Okay. So, when they decided to use force to enforce their view,
Yeah.
the opposing agency that's representing the other person that disagrees with this may oppose that view with
Right.
force.
Right.
So now you have two security agencies with X level of firepower in a war. And that leads to the destruction of America. Yeah, and so this is the obvious objection that almost everybody has against anarchism.
Let me respond. I'm assuming you believe, I don't really like the term, but I'm assuming you believe in states' rights as opposed to a strong central government, right? You would rather have 50 states with 50 different laws. So why isn't that the same problem there, right? Isn't the solution instead we have the federal government do anything in case there's a disagreement in this state?
Be happy to answer. Look, I'm a believer in states' rights. It has nothing to do with the fact that there is no conflict in law in America, because there is a supremacy clause that means that what is in the sphere of the federal government will impose its view on the state. That doesn't mean that as a policy you're not going to have, I believe you should have as many things decided by the state, but some things shouldn't be decided by the state and can't be decided by the state. And the point is that there really is no conflict. There isn't any state that's going to go to war with the U.S. Army. But in my example,
But why would there not be a conflict?
no, there's not an armed conflict, not a military conflict. When the U.S. government sends troops to Arkansas, even though the governor believes in discrimination or whatever and he wants to segregate, he says, okay. Why? It's very obvious. Why is the reason? Why does he say, okay, and I'm going to accede to your will?
Well, he's outnumbered, and
Yeah, right. But when there are security agencies that have relatively similar levels of force, and some that think they have a lot of force, more than the other one, then they don't, they miscalculate, and they think they can impose their will, and then they find out they can't, they're in a war. That means, that's what I've been talking about in these debates. That's war in your neighborhood, tanks in the street, like Lebanon. Then this is the thing that why people don't go for anarchism, because they know it's anarchic. In other words, it's chaos. It's armed conflict, not discussions, but bullets and missiles flying. That's the problem.
well, first of all, I mean, if we're assuming that these defense agencies are in it for a profit, war is very expensive. Violence is not a profit-making way to achieve disputes. So the question, look, utopia isn't an option. The question isn't what is going to produce this ideal society with where everyone holds hands and sings songs and there's no disputes. The question is, what's a more likely outcome? I think if you have to spend your own money or fight in a war yourself, you're less likely to be militaristic. Where if you can draft some poor soul to do it and pay the person through other people's money. So I think government has a much stronger incentive to engage in armed conflicts. And even when there's disputes among states with very different laws, the solution isn't always a war. A lot of times it is, and that's bad, but it's not always, it's not violence is the way to settle disputes. Right? Most conflicts now don't even go to court, right? Over 90% of conflicts, they agree to a private arbitrator first, saying, okay, we may have a conflict sometime down the road. Why don't we agree that if we ever have a conflict, we'll agree that this guy will